Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is called Working for Halloween. Very timely Old War story. I happened to just think of it last night, and being that I still have the Halloweenist shirt out, and Halloweenist was just a few days ago, this is a very good and opportune time to tell the story. So this dates back to when I was a children's in elementary school and beyond that. So I'll kind of go through the years as we go. So we're talking 1980s. We'll start around 1984 or 5, something like that. Somewhere in there. Maybe 86. 4, 5, 6. Probably more toward the 5 or 6. So, middle of the 1980s, and here I am as a kid, and it's time to go trick-or-treating. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the little plumpkin that I had as a kid had a strap on it, and I used to carry it around and collect candy in that. I think it's still around at my parents' house. And the one that my sister used to use as well. That's vintage now. And it's not your McDonald's buckets or anything like. I don't know where these came from. They were just always there. I don't know. I think my dad wrote our names in magic marker on the bottom of them. I'm not exactly certain. But I remember going, and the costumes, I don't remember exactly what. I know I was like a spider one year. For the life of me, I don't know. I always had the failed costumes in that I wasn't like Superman or Spider-Man or anything like, cool as such, anything like that. Of course, I could have just gone as I am. I'm scary enough that way. I get that. Which actually we did in later years, my sister and I. So the thing that ties in, okay, right here, which a comment by Tollboy actually clued me into this, which I had completely forgotten about. Smack dab in the 1980s, middle of the 1980s, and near my parents' house is an ice skating rink, an outdoor ice skating rink. What in the hell they do with that the rest of the year, I don't know. But there ain't no ice there, and we were there for Halloweenists. Along with a coworker of my dad who had 3 or 4 kids. 4? 4? I think 4. Yeah, 4 kids. And they were around our age, my sister and I, and we did get together a couple times a year, so we knew them, and we both showed up separately in that, but I think it was her mother who said, hey, we're doing this, do you want to go? And that kind of clued us in. Now, this was definitely walking distance from the house. I know that for a fact. In fact, my grandmother used to walk right past that over all of the years and go yet like a mile further up the road to the train station, as old as she was, to take the train back to Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, where she lived, and get off there to come to my parents' house. We were on this ice skating rink, and that is where I got my first Little Hug fruit barrel. Had a video on that. There's a link in the prescription, and they still make them today, and I still buy them from time to time, but I remember having them when I was a kid. They lined us all up, or I don't know, all of us, or depending on age or grade, or I don't know what the hell it was, and they did like a contest, see who had the best costume, and I guess the parents judged it by applause, something like that. And I don't know if they were. I never won anything, obviously, but every kid got a little Hug fruit barrel. So that was the first time I had that. Now, here's something interesting that I also remember. My dad still had his 70. I can't remember, 77, 78 Dodge Aspen. One of those two. Anyway, he had that. I think it was a 78. Anyways, I never really got to see that car at night much because typically anytime I was in the car it was daytime. And but this time, you know, it was Halloweenish, so it's October and all that, almost no November, and it gets dark out early. So because of that, because of that, um, we drove over there, which is very surprising, like I said, because it's really only a few blocks and it could have walked. But I remember we drove over there with this Dodge Aspen and we got back in the car. I remember he turned the lights on and he turned the key to start it and it wouldn't start. And no, it was not due to a dead battery or a dead starter or anything like that. It was due to an alarm that he had wired into the car himself. And what he did was he drilled a hole in the back fender of the car on the driver's side, and it used one of those round keys, and it was a key switch. So you put it in, you turn it, and that would arm it, and then you'd go and you'd undo it before you go back to the car. For an alarm to make sound, he actually had a vintage, even then vintage, 1960s siren off of an ambulance. I still have that siren to this day, and one day I will have a video of that. In fact, I have it right in the garage now, ready to go. I remember the car didn't start because he also had wired in a starter kill. Don't know how he did it or where he tied in or what it was, but it also killed the starter, and that's why it didn't crank. So I remember he had the lights on, turned the key, had forgotten to shut the thing. Whether the siren was operating or not, I don't know if he had disconnected it at one point or maybe he had a relay for it that went bad, but at one point the siren had stopped working. And I don't think it sounded, but the siren itself still functions, or at least it did last I knew. And it definitely does spin. So we will definitely get a video of that one day. But I remember seeing that, and it was just bizarre because I had never seen the lights on. My dad had to get out and go to the back of the car, and you hear him, you know, with the little key just go and get back in, turn the key, and you go. And that was that. Well, anyway, that was one little story that, again, my memory was jogged by Tollboy on that one. The Little Hug fruit barrels and then that siren. But then we're going to just talk about pretty much every other year trick-or-treating. Now, I'm sure I've mentioned this probably in earlier Halloweenish videos over the years, but my sister and I had to fucking work for our candy. Okay? We were trick-or-treating, but I mean, this was serious fucking business. Okay, this wasn't a, you know, just go around. Because what would happen is usually my dad would take us. So he'd walk with us and kind of hang by the sidewalk, maybe go halfway up the walkway, and we would go ring the bell, or maybe when we were really young, he would ring the bell. I don't remember. But anyway, that we go, and we were like really little, and you know, your feet start to hurt, or you're tired, or you're cold, or this or that, and we would get candy in our plumpkins, and that was that. But in later years, when we were old enough to go ourselves, and I'm going to kind of double back on this in a minute, my sister and I would go. Now, the problem was we lived in Hanukkah Heights, as I had called it, or heard it called. It was the Jewish section, and that was the wrong area to be trick-or-treating. We would ring the doorbell, okay? And a lot of these houses were the same. They had the front door, and then it had usually about 4 long rectangular panes of glass. Here, 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 and here. On both sides. There might have been a light on outside. There might not have been. It wouldn't make a difference. Either which way, we'd go, we'd ring the bell. And we'd wait. These are all old, crotchety people. Kids today can't wait a fucking second. I can be at the door with my hand on the fucking doorknob, and they ring the bell. As soon as I hear that, I go to open the door. They've already turned their back, and they're ready to go. I'm dead. It's like, it's that bad, some of them. They need more than instant gratification. It's terrible. But we waited patiently, my sister and I. And like I said, we worked for this candy because we were out there all the time. We didn't take breaks. We didn't this and that. Da da da. We didn't say, "Oh, Mom, can you pick us up? We're cold." No. We went out and we did this all ourselves, and we made the circle back around, kind of going around the block and hitting both sides of the street and all the whole thing. And by the time we made it back to our house, that's when it was over. But anyway, we'd ring the bell and you'd be waiting. And waiting. And finally, somebody would come to the door. You'd see a light go on inside through them rectangular panes of glass. They'd look. They'd see kids in costumes and go, and then they'd stumble off to get their candy and come back to the door. And what did they have? Well, because there were these rectangular panes of glass, you wouldn't want somebody to punch that in and then reach in, undo the deadbolt. So these were the kind of locks that you needed a key for each one. So then they got to go find their keys. We just want fucking candy, and we're standing there waiting for this bullshit. We didn't know enough to go to a different area because stay close to home is what the parents said, so we were being good little boys and girls and doing that. And we wait, and finally they'd stumble to the door, and you'd get old coffee table candy or pennies. Oh, God. I think I had an old war story, Take Raisins, and I told parts of the story in that, but this has some new twists. Anyway, we would go around, and it was like painstaking, house after house after house after house. Oh, and we did another thing, I remember. We'd go to a house, we'd go up the walkway, and we'd ring the bell, and if they answered the door and gave us candy, we'd get our candy, we'd say thank you. Kids today, they can't do that because they're very artistic. Paint lots of nice pictures in kindergarten and 5th grade. But anyway, we would say thank you and turn around and walk back down the walkway. If they didn't answer the door, we'd cut across their lawn. So that was our thing, because some people are, get off my lawn, So we'd cut across their lawn like that. So then the next thing was we'd go around, and I remember after my dad stopped going with us and we didn't need parental supervision, took the Plumpkin. I remember one year where this thing was filled to the brim, and it was heavy. It was heavy. I don't know what we did, how we got so much candy. It's all for naught, you'll find out. But we started just forgetting that and taking a couple of plastic grocery bags back when you used to, those were legal. We used to have those. And we would take, because that would hold a lot more than the Plumpkin would. It wasn't a tiny thing. It was, it was a decent size. But we filled that fucker up. We sure did. Well, anyway, long and short of the story was we would do that. And then, again, I'm going to keep going forward. My sister had a friend, Margot. And Margot was Margeaux. Margot. Like Go Herd. If you're watching, thank you. Anyhow, Margot was pretty cool, and we used to go. She lived on, quote unquote, the wrong side of the tracks. Found out why. You ever wonder why it's called the wrong side of the tracks? I looked that up one day, and this dates back to when trains were run off of coal and stuff like that. All that black smoke that used to come out, and like steam engines and stuff, where they burn fuel like that to make steam to make it go. Um, the wind would typically blow in a particular direction, and therefore the smoke would blow in that particular direction as well. And they noted that, and that's how those areas on that side became the wrong side of the tracks. And if you've ever, what do I call this? If you're familiar with that term and you've seen that, where the other side of the tracks is just a little bit more seedy and a bit different, that's how it was over there. I think some of the homes were older in that area, is maybe one thing. They kind of like weren't kept up as much, a little scary or something like that. So maybe that was part of it. I'm not exactly certain. But they did give out much better candy. And they also weren't old, completely crotchety people. So you could ring the bell and you could hit house after house after house after house after house. Now, it eventually got to the point that my sister and I were pushing like 11, 12, 13 years old. And it's kind of like, that's kind of enough trick-or-treating at this point. And we just stopped wearing costumes altogether. We just showed up. And we were teenagers, so we would just say trick-or-treat and whatever, and they'd give us candy because they didn't want to trick. We never pulled a trick. In later years, my sister would carry a can or two of shaving cream as a weapon to use in case other kids came by to fuck with us. Never did happen, though. But anyway, that was the option there. We used to go with Margot because she was on the wrong side of the tracks and that. Anyway, we'd get all the candy. We'd come back home finally. And by the way, we would walk to Margot's house, which was where the train station, past the train station, quite a number of blocks in after the train station, as a matter of fact. We would walk there. And then my sister and I would have to walk all the way back after. So we had like a mile and change walk on the way back. And by that point, it was way too late to keep trick-or-treating. It was like well after 9 at that point. So it's done. But we'd get home, and in the earlier years, like I think usually like 9 o'clock, it's the Great Plumpkin. Charlie Brown used to come on. And we would watch that, and I'd watch the CBS special presentation bumper. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, but it sounds vaguely familiar, just YouTube that real quick and you'll be like, oh, I remember that well. Yes, you will. You will remember that very, very well if you're around my age or older. Anyhow, we would get home and put that on TV, but then what we would do is we'd take our candy and we'd dump it all out. So I had my pile and my sister had her pile. And then we'd go and trade. Oh, I don't like these. You can just have them. Okay, well, I'm not fond of these. You can just have them. Okay, great. Oh, man, look, you got a lot of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. I didn't get nearly as many. I'll give you 3 Dum-Dums for one of those, Okay, that's fair, and then, let me have one of those, and back and forth, and we'd trade, and we would always make decent and equitable trades between us, and we were both satisfied at the end of that. Until my mother came in. Now, you have to remember again, this was the 1980s. So in the 1980s, we had the white van that would drive around. What's the white van? Wikipedia has something on that. Something about a guy in a white van driving around trying to abduct kids or something. And it was all like a scam and shit like that. And even in we were in elementary school and you could see the main road from there. And when a white van would come, when this was like really popular, we would like all like duck down in our seats and shit. Like they're going to see us from yards and yards and yards and yards away in a classroom inside. But even so, it was just kind of a fun little thing. Oh, man. So there was that going around, the white van thing going around. And then, which is kind of more like a meme today. It was sort of like the 80s version of that. So we had that. But another one that went around was people putting razor blades and or needles in the candy. Now, how the fuck they're going to do that when this thing is perfectly wrapped from the factory, I don't know. But my mother instructed us to open up any candy that we wanted to have, put it on a plate, take a knife, and cut it into little slivers and show it to her so she can approve, and then it was considered safe to eat. In later years, my sister and I said, you know what? Fuck her and all that bullshit. If it looks perfectly wrapped, it's safe enough. Okay, if there's a hole in the wrapper, questionable. And if it's definitely been tampered with, obviously you just throw it out. You never do know. It's not likely, but maybe it happened somewhere once and it blew up like things go viral today. So that was that. But the bigger problem is my mother would come in and she'd go, "What'd you get? What'd you get?" So we have our stash out and we're doing our trades, my sister and I. And my mother would come by and say, "I'll take that, I'll 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 take that." And we're like, hey! We stood out there for hours dealing with coffee table fucking candy from some of these houses and old farts and all kinds of shit like that in the cold. My mother did nothing. Even in the old days, my dad was the one who walked us around. She never did shit. My dad never wanted any candy from us. Never. Never. Did he sneak some when we were in school? Maybe. I don't know. I don't care. But my mother would just blatantly fucking grab shit. That, that was the government at work. Because you go to work every day, you work, and then the government says, yoink, that's mine. What the fuck? And then it all culminates with, I don't remember what the Charlie Brown special was called. It was the Thanksgiving one. A Very Happy Thanksgiving, Charlie Brown. I don't know what it's called. But I seem to remember in the early stage of that film, cartoon, whatever you want to call it, they would say, "Oh, yeah, we got another holiday coming up." And Charlie Brown was like, "Another holiday? So soon? I haven't even finished all of my Halloween candy yet." And I'm like, yeah, because that's how much my sister and I got. And my mother also put this hard and fast rule of like no more than 2 pieces of candy. Now, granted, a piece of candy was like this fucking big when we were a kid, instead of the size of a dime, They were a lot bigger then. So I get that. But cutting the shit into slivers and her just taking this shit, man, oh man. We worked hard for our candy, and let me tell you, it was a nice treat. It's actually funny, 2 other things, because my sister and I were not deprived of candy as kids. Now, our parents would never buy us candy. Just about never. But Grandma would come on the weekend. And Grandma would come, and every Sunday, for sure, she would go to... There was a little shopping center like 4 blocks from the house, and she would walk there. She had her old lady basket, if you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes she'd take that, and she had her old lady basket. In fact, that could spawn another old war story, as a matter of fact. Huh. Anyway, she'd take her old lady basket and she'd go there to get the Sunday paper. So there was like a card store that would sell the Sunday paper. And she would buy the paper and she would bring my sister and I, and we'd say, Grandma, Grandma, can we get this? So Grandma would get it for us. And it was kind of funny. Now, I don't remember what it cost back in the day. 69, 79 cents, maybe in the later days. I don't even know. But my grandmother, growing up in the Great Depression, where nothing was wasted anywhere, was really something that she was willing to spend that kind of money on us grandkids. But I guess, I mean, it's grandkids, so that's what you do. So maybe that was one. Oh, little trick I learned. There is a grocery store in the area here where they sell a lot of candy from overseas. One day, the wife and I were in there, and we decided, I don't know, this just looks good. I don't know what it is. It's chocolate covered something. I don't know. And we tried another candy another time. Candies from outside the U.S. beat U.S. candies hands down. They are so much better. I can't even tell you how much better they are. Because name big name candy bars. Okay, a lot of them are by Mars Corporation. Big conglomerate. Corporate American greed. Poor quality ingredients. Smaller product size. You try overseas shit. Fruit flavors? Real fruit was used to make the flavors, not artificial. And the chocolate, probably, if it was like milk chocolate, had real fucking milk in it at one point to make it. It's so much better. If you ever get a chance to try candies of any kind from another country, believe me, go for it. You will not be sorry. You're going to get some weird ones every now and again. You got to remember there's different cultural delicacies as such, but still, even so, you will find some really, really good ones that absolutely blow away the crap that they're giving us here in the U.S. Anyway, that's really going to about do it. This sort of impromptu yet timely Halloweenist type old war story with Uncle Jay. And with that, that will bring this episode to a close. So I thank you very kindly for watching, and I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, check the links in the prescription, and remember, there's going to be another video spawning from this on that siren one day coming up. So that'll be coming up in the future. Don't know exactly when, but I have it in my possession to make the video on. Anyway, take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.